How do you tell the story of a man? Is it talent, fame, career, or family? When speaking about James Paul David Bunning, or Jim Bunning as he was known, it's all of these and so much more. Jim Bunning was born October 23rd, 1931 in Covington, Kentucky. Raised in Southgate, he was definitely a Northern Kentucky kid. Jim even met the love of his life in elementary school. He went on to attend Xavier High School in Cincinnati and got an economics degree at Xavier University. But instead of me telling you all of this, let's hear it from the people who knew him best.
Tremendous individual, and he makes you think of so many things that you actually not really thought about it before, but once you get off the game and start thinking about the accomplishments of all of the gentlemen that you play with, one that really stands out, without a doubt, is Mr. Jim Bunning.
Jim was a good pitcher, and he was a workhorse. He signed his baseball contract when he was a junior in college. Now, probably you know this, but he had to get his parents to sign for him, with him, because he was underage. And he had to promise his mom and dad that he would finish his his college before he would, play professional baseball. So he missed spring training for, the first 3 years, I guess it was.
He was a great player, a great pitcher. He pitched both leagues. He was a winner everywhere he went. He competed and he tried to win. He was a winner. And can you see the guy out there on the pitching mound, and he's looking at you, and you're looking at him, and you know when the pitch is tough, and you know when you have to bear down and try your best, because he really wants to beat you out, and that was Jim Bunning.
Everybody knew who Jim Bunning was. He was a legend in baseball, Hall of Famer, and a hard-nosed ball player like a Bob Gibson. I mean, when they're in the mound, they threw with everything that you had, and they worked hard. They threw complete games compared to what they do now. Like I know Gibson at one time might have had 24 wins, and I think 18 or 19 were complete games, and I think Jim was same type of pitcher.
I loved going to the ball games. We got something to eat at specific innings. And when Dad would pitch, it was really awesome, but when he would hit, it was even more awesome. And I do remember him hitting a home run in Red Stadium once, and we all stood on our chairs and were just hollering.
1964 on Father's Day, it was June 21st. I think being the oldest, you had a few privileges, and one of them was I got to go to that game with my mom. I remember driving up from New Jersey. I think we were living in Cherry Hill, New Jersey at the time, and we went up there. It was the first game of a doubleheader. In New York at that time, the World's Fair was going on. Well, my dad pitched the perfect game. It was amazing. My mom and I were saying, not the rosary, but Our Fathers and Hail Marys there at the end, because you'd think, being 11 years old, I wouldn't be that much of a baseball fan, but I was, and I knew more statistics probably than any boy at the time. I love baseball. I could name everybody on the team. We were down to the last out, and then the amazing thing was, in the end, the Mets fans at Shea Stadium, I think that was either their first or second season. They were a very new team, but they were cheering for my dad. I mean, that was history to be witnessed.
Jim Bunning is now one strike from a perfect ball game. How do you stay cool and how do you stay poised in a spot like this? The crowd is standing. Slugging out, a perfect game for Jim Bunning. Here come his teammates. Oh, what a happy
But my dad was asked that night. He was so happy, sweating, but so happy. And We got to go to the Ed Sullivan show that night, sitting in the audience, and that was amazing.
I can remember during the perfect game, we were swimming in a pool, and I can just remember being rushed out of the pool to go get all dressed up so that we could be in all these pictures, and I didn't quite understand what was going on at the time. But I just knew it was important, and it was a lot of fun.
Gift that you can give any great player to accomplish what is probably one of the most difficult things to do in baseball as a pitcher is a perfect game, and he did definitely, continue to be doing what you are very proud of him is the way he go out every day to put that uniform on and give you 150% all the time. With him in the mound, you had a chance to win. You can talk about Jim Bunning, all day long and all night long, because of those ways that he had that possesses that intimidation type thing that we talked about on the mound. He never gave up. He would walk into the dugout, and you were just 2 runs down now because they scored 2 off of Jim, but he'll come over, throw the glove on the bench and say, well, boys, you better start working now because no, they're not going to score anymore. So give me some runs. And that's the way he was, and everybody just start listening the way he goes about, his business. And when he said it, he meant it. There's no question about it, because that was his business. He never fool around or mess around. And let's play baseball, and they play it the right way. And when you see a gentleman like Jim Bunning, you start looking at his records. Well, he's a man that won 100 games in each the National and the American League. He is a Hall of Famer.
A good candidate is lanky Jim Bunning, with all the pitching talent anyone could need for immortality.
He also really always his career, he did not make it to the World Series. But I remember in 1964, he had been traded to the Phillies, and the Phillies were doing awesome. Back then, there were only 2 teams that made the pennant, the National League and the American League. There wasn't all this playoff stuff. And my dad would tell you too, back there, a pitcher was a pitcher. He started every 4th or 5th day. They didn't count pitches and they didn't count the speed. You pitched till the end of the game unless, you got hit in the face with a ball or something. And my dad was tough like that and proud of it.
And all the people were so sweet and kind to us in Philadelphia. We were treated like royalty there, and they presented us with all these gifts, and we got to go out on the field, and it was just fun. We just, you always felt special, and we had just such a fun time.
But that season, we already had tickets to the World Series. My parents had them framed in their basement. And unfortunately, the Phillies lost something like 10 games in a row at the end of that year. But on the last day of the season, my dad did beat the Reds. Unfortunately, the Cardinals beat the Atlanta Braves, and so the Cardinals won the pennant.
He was great. He was a hard-nosed manager too. He wanted you to work just as hard as he expected his players to work, but he was fair and firm. I had not met him personally till I was in the Eastern League, which is AA minor league baseball. And he was the manager of Reading, the Phillies AA team. And they were playing in Quebec City, which was the Expos team. Came up to home plate and he said, Randy Marsh from Covington, Kentucky. I've never met anybody that's umpired in professional baseball from Covington, Kentucky. I said, yes, sir, that's me. When they went to Sherbrooke, we were supposed to umpire the games in Sherbrooke. And he brought his team into Sherbrooke, and their team was supposed to stay at this rickety old hotel. And he got so upset about it, he wouldn't have his players live in a place like that. He yanked them all out of the hotel. Went and found another hotel to put them in. And I guarantee you the Phillies just went along with whatever he wanted to do. He was doing what was right. And like I say, I had him in the Eastern League there, and he was fair but firm, but he let you umpire. He was always nice. He could be sarcastic. When John McSherry, who was the umpire that passed away in Cincinnati years ago, when he was in the minor leagues, he got a call during spring training that there was going to be a B game And Jim Bunning was going to get a couple of extra innings in to pitch the game, and John's rushing like heck to get there. This is a big deal for a minor league guy to get the big league game of Jim Bunning. So the first pitch he throws, John calls it a ball, and Jim stood on the mound and goes, "Well, there went your perfect game."
It was when Dad was managing Toledo Mud Hens in, obviously, Toledo. And he didn't like us to wait where all the fans waited. He wanted us to wait by the car. He was driving, I remember, a red, kind of maroon Eldorado Cadillac with a white interior. And he always parked close to the stadium, same place every night. So we go out there, and a foul ball had hit the windshield, and it was broken, and the ball was right there on the side of the car. So we're standing there, it was myself and two of my brothers. So we're like going, I'm not telling him, like he wouldn't see it himself. So we're standing there waiting. He was always like one of the last ones out. So we were waiting, and finally he comes out, and he looks at the ball, and he looks at the windshield, and he just says, "Get in the car." So we did, we got in the car. So he got the windshield fixed. He did not learn his lesson. So the windshield was fixed, he drove back, parked at the same place, same night. First night he drove that car back from when the windshield was broken. We got out there, and there was a foul ball with a broken windshield again. So I looked at my brothers, I said, I think I'm walking home. He came out, did the same thing. Looked at the ball, looked at the windshield, said, "Get in the car." But he did learn, he did not park there anymore. And that was pretty funny.
Jim Bunning made the transition from baseball into politics seem natural.
Then after baseball, we came home, and our city council person wanted Jim to run for city council. And we never thought anything about doing that. But we prayed about it and decided that we wanted to give something back to the community. So we ran, and he won. And he got more votes than the mayor. So that was the first time he was in public office. And then it was our state senator. I don't want to mention him. Well, he's in heaven now. But anyway, he switched parties so he could get a leadership role in Frankfort, and Jim didn't like that too much. So he ran for that seat and won. And then he was the head of the Senate in Frankfort because he persuaded 7 other senators to vote for him. Okay, so then we had another time that Gene Schneider was going to retire. So we prayed again, and there we got into the Senate, the House, with the House of Representatives. And then we were there for 12 years, and then Wendell Ford was going to retire, and we had so many people, presidents calling Jim, and I thought, what are they calling about? So we ran for the Senate, and you know the story there. So he was the senator for 2 terms, 12 years, and then he was home, which is wonderful because the kids, it was a wonderful mellowing time.
One day, Jim walks in and did something he rarely did with me. He looked at me and he said, tossed me the car keys. He said, "Will you drive me down the White House?" He never really did that. And I hadn't looked at the schedule to see what was on, so I thought I was just going to drive down. And this was the day where there was a lane right next to the White House, and you just parked there. So if you remember Congress, you would have your little license plate that you put on it. So we jumped in the car, I drive him down to the White House, we pull into the parking space, and I'm figuring I'm just going to wait for him. And as we're sitting there, he goes, "No, come on in. I want you to come in with me." I hadn't been cleared or anything, and I told that. He said, "Just walk in like you own the place. You're with me, we're fine." So we walk in, we go through the White House, we go through the East Wing, out into the Rose Garden, where George Bush 41, H.W. Bush, was having a Rose Garden ceremony for Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio. And so here I am a kid from Ludlow, Kentucky, sitting in the Rose Garden of the White House with Jim Bunning, Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, and George Herbert Walker Bush, which is not a bad day for a kid from Ludlow.
But I got to know Jim Bunning more in the political realm. In 1997, I ran in the U.S. Senate race as Lieutenant Governor. I was able to still do that. And he was involved in that race as well. And so you always knew with Jim Bunning what you were getting. He didn't change. It's not like politicians that we have today that put their finger up in the wind and decide how they're going to vote on something based on the political trends. Jim Bunning knew who he was, what he was about. He won an election. He won that Senate race, and no one was going to change Jim Bunning. And so I think it was frustrating to people on the left, perhaps, that he was not the type that would change that much. And so I think he was true to his word. I think that's one of the things that people say about him. You knew where he stood. He was elected by the people of Kentucky, and he was going to represent those people, and that meant certain times he wasn't going to compromise. And so I think he was true to his word, and he wasn't pliable based on the blowing of the wind.
First off, what a lot of people don't realize about Jim was that his degree was in economics from Xavier. And he had quite his own opinions on how the economy should be going and what the Fed should be doing. Some of the great housing committee hearings, Jim was on the Banking, Housing, and Finance Committee when he first got up there. And I can remember every time Greenspan would come in, he and Alan Greenspan would just go head to head on differences on the economy, on inflation, on things of that nature, and it always used to surprise people that the old right-handed baseball pitcher knew so much about the economy and could actually hold his own with somebody like Alan Greenspan in a debate.
A lot of my memories about my dad are involved in his time in the House and in the Senate. And if you would never meet anyone that was a more fierce advocate than he was.
Easiest decision I ever made was to say yes to the offer to work for Jim Bunning. And he was a true public servant. He was tenacious, very bold, matter of fact, blunt. He was a fighter, and we needed that, and he fought for families.
Senator Bunning wanted to offer an amendment that would create a fund that would help the workers who had been injured at the Paducah plant in Paducah, Kentucky. And at the time, Senator Ted Kennedy, who is about as opposite on the political spectrum as you could get, was also interested in that, and he wanted to support the amendment. So when we came to the markup, the time for Senator Bunning to offer the amendment, and it was closed session, so all the senators 25 senators on the committee and their staff are all packed into this room, and Senator Bunning says, I want to offer the Bunning-Kennedy amendment, and the chairman at the time, Senator John Warner from Virginia, just said, wait a minute, the what? The Bunning-Kennedy amendment? You guys both agree on this? There were 2 minutes of jokes about the Bunning-Kennedy amendment, and they said, yeah, you don't need to explain it, we'll take it, it's fine. If you guys agree, that's all we need to know.
So appreciated his willingness to stick to what he believed in, regardless of if you're going to get some flack. And one of the first times that I really experienced that, we had an adopted son from Korea. I can remember he had a lot of special needs, and I can remember being concerned at one point about getting him naturalized so that there would be no chance of anything ever happening to him. And we lived in Dallas at the time, and I went to the immigration place and tried to be a part of that process, and it was so difficult. And I remember calling my dad in Washington and how wonderful he was to connect me with the right people in Texas so that we could get help getting Sam naturalized, which was wonderful. He promoted legislation that had to do with adoption, which was wonderful.
I'm from Cuba, and they know what happened in Cuba. with the communists and Castro and stuff, and I left Cuba. And in 1963, I didn't come back after 10 years to see my family again. And then I come back and see my family, and then I try to get my family come here to see me. And what else? And I called him, we called Jim Bunning, and he helped me. He got my mother and my 3 sisters in here in the United States. They came down and met my sons and my wife. And you know, there was a great time, and I always been grateful to him for what he did and what, you know, nothing. We call him, he say, right away, Tony. I mean, you know, I would like to help you, and he did. And I got my family, but a few years later, he helped us again. And my family came back again, and then we got that relation going, and then when we both made it to the Hall of Fame, well, he made it before me. When then I got there, you know, we were talking, and I thanked him for that, and that was great. I mean, a guy who play against you, battle like we did, and I never play in the same team. I play against him, and come back and you call him, and he helped you. I mean, when I hear he passed away, it hurt me. I mean, you know, a guy who helped you with your family pass away. It's like a family pass away for me. And that's how I feel about Jim Bunning.
Always felt like I had someone that I could call and talk to and at least have a voice in Washington and a concern that we shared together, and really our whole family.
And he said he could take the heat because he had stood alone on the mound and been booed by 60,000 people. So he was a man of great principle. When he believed something strongly, he never wavered. And he was one of the most inspirational people I've met in my life. A Hall of Famer not only in baseball, but in life.
Jim and I liked each other in the 4th and 5th grade. I went to St. Therese School with him, and I liked him the whole time, all through high school. I ended up and married Jim when I was 19 and he was 20.
I married a gal I met in the 4th and 5th grade. I was a 5th grader, she was a 4th grader. And we dated, well, we didn't date, but because our father was a little more strict than I was when I was a papa. And we dated off and on all through high school. And finally, when I graduated high school, we really got to date each other then. And by the sophomore year in college, we got married. She was 19 and I was 20. And we proceeded to reel off 9 children in 13 years.
I never had a new coat because I had 2 older sisters. Always had hand-me-downs, but he took me shopping all by myself downtown Cincinnati and picked me out a really pretty red coat and took me to get ice cream. We have some fun memories of him, especially with my grandkids, especially the later years of his life, the last 6 years. We really got to know him, and he knew my grandkids, and they loved him very dearly. And you get to see a side of him that we never saw growing up because he softened a lot over his age, and he just was so loved the children. He really did, and they have special memories now, and I'm grateful for that.
A wonderful memory for me was I got to sing the national anthem at the Hall of Fame, so that was wonderful. That's fun.
And I just really appreciate that value of when you believe something wholeheartedly, that no matter what kind of negative feedback you're getting or influence, that you'll stand firm to what you believe. So that's the one characteristic of my dad that I really believe in, and I think he taught us well. You know, we thought of our dad as our dad. We didn't really think of him as somebody famous, and you know, but it really afforded us as children so many opportunities that we had, and you know, grateful for and happy, and just a lifetime of memories.
May 26th, 2017, Jim Bunning left us. He was a talented baseball player. Inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, his career spanned sports and state and national politics. He was a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. James Paul David Bunning, or Jim Bunning. That is the story of a man.